We should be ready. So just as a reminder, the first half of this, oh, sorry, Jackson, I accidentally muted you. Um, I was trying to admit somebody, and I think Janessa beat me to it. So the first half of this hour is going to be a guided Q&A. Jackson's going to be your moderator, and then Janessa and I will jump back in at about 30 minutes to make a determination based on how large the group gets as to whether or not we'll accept unmuting questions from the audience, or we'll just field those questions via the Q&A. Please don't hesitate to add your questions to the Q&A. For those who are here a little bit early, it's a reminder that you might have to go under the More button at the bottom of your screen in order to find that Q&A, but the Q&A is still here. And then also, we did bring over the Q&A, the unanswered questions from earlier, and keep the chat alive. You can now use emojis to respond. Janessa, what am I missing?
Oh, goodness, what are we missing? I just wanted to remind folks that this is our open Q&A, the second half of this session. And so you don't need to have attended the earlier lightning talks. We have our wonderful speakers representing so many different experiences in different libraries with different populations and evidence synthesis. So this is our last session. Whatever is left on your mind, I would invite you to put it in the Q&A. You can ask it and see if any of us have an answer, or if anyone who has also joined this session does. So it truly is an open Q&A. I'll remind you, if your screen is a little tiny, I'm on my MacBook. The Q&A might be hidden underneath the More at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You might have to dig for it a tiny little bit. Other than that, I guess we'll move on.
Yeah, one last thing. If you are comfortable with it, I would like to invite panelists to make their turn their videos on.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, Jackson, take it away.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so let's start the guided Q&A. Again, my name is Jackson. I'll be moderating this Q&A. Just for presenters, as you respond to questions, I'll be timing, but please try to stick to about 2 minutes for answers, so we have time for all the presenters that are listed to be able to respond. All right, so let's start with the first question. For Michelle first, and then Jade, and then Christina, Amy, and Ken. We'll start with Michelle. How have you approached building confidence and skills in your team members newer to evidence synthesis so they can partner on reviews?
So this is, sorry.
Very good, thank you.
So this is something that's we've been struggling with, because initially the plan was we'd hire somebody, they would get sent to, a while ago it was Pitt, and then it became Michigan. They get the training, they maybe would shadow, and we go from there. But due to the high demand, Pitt no longer does this, and the high demand at Michigan, we have been unable to get our people in for that formal training. So now what we're doing is we've been assembling links, webinars, recordings, a variety of material. We are potentially going to be putting that into our course management system and having like a sort of informal course. And we have been assigning our new people with a buddy, right? I do a review, my buddy comes along with me and she shadows me and works on the review. And I think we're probably going to get more formally into peer reviewing searches. I mean, there's a lot of different pieces. It's not a cohesive plan yet, and I would like it to be more cohesive, especially since we have new hires. But that is what we have been doing. And I am pleased to say that the new librarian who's working with me on a review, I mean, she's doing stuff on the review and they made her a co-author, which I think is really cool. So that's me.
Thank you. Jade?
Yes, I'm here. So the question was, if I heard correctly, Jade mentioned she planned to use look into using AI and in systematic reviews, which is, I'm non-medical sciences, by the way, but I have been beta testing with a company called Cogneto. Those of you who are at the ESI symposium, I talked about it. And what they're doing right now is training AI to do the abstract screening. And eventually the goal for them is to train AI to help with everything through data extraction. So right now, when we get done with full text screening, I move the data set of articles into this Cogneto software. And some things are already, AI will pull our citations for us. They pull like all that bibliographic information in. So it becomes part of my Excel chart that they export. But it is starting to where it can do our abstract screening, but because it's beta testing, it's really neat that they put in check marks where we as the team can go in and check what AI has done at any time and stop it or teach it new. So, but that's in beta testing right now. The other thing that I've been finding is people refining their research questions, because obviously sometimes they're too broad, and I make suggestions, but I also encourage the research team to explore AI and what the outputs are for their research questions to help them refine them. So that's how I'm dipping my toes in, but I really have hopes that Cogneto, I know they're training it on a big study from an NIH grant on Alzheimer's, and it's really working well. I'm seeing it do the screening for that project, and it's very promising. That would speed up our work immensely.
Thank you. Yeah, and it sounds like that AI maybe could help with some of the processes for the newer team members. Christina, Amy, and Ken.
Yeah, I'll start us off, and then Ken and Christina, feel free to jump in. I'll just talk a little bit about, I mean, Michelle mentioned a couple of these things too in her response, but definitely encouraging new people on our evidence synthesis team to attend any type of professional development or synchronous workshops or trainings is obviously very, very helpful. But then we also do shadowing. So like we have a new health sciences librarian who like I'll just, if I'm working on search translations, like I'll just have her hop in for an hour or two and kind of hang out with me while I'm doing that and work through it together. And then, you know, doing different trainings on their own time, as well as those synchronous professional development opportunities, like the U of M practice sets that I found out about at the ESI conference, which are awesome, by the way. She has found those to be really super helpful as well. And then we have our community of practice group too at Baylor. So having the new people like join that and get involved in that, like our new health sciences librarian just went to a workshop recently, and our community of practice meeting is tomorrow. So she's going to come back and like kind of share what she learned, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But Ken or Christina, there might be other things you want to add to that, so feel free to chime in.
Well, the only other thing I could add is that we've been pretty fortunate that Baylor, especially our dean, is very supportive and really wants us to do it. In fact, all of us are required to have at least 5% of our time, if not more, dedicated to professional development and research practices and activities. So we have no excuse not to go ahead and do some training that would help with building skills, and that's given us a lot of flexibility for doing things like Amy said with our new health sciences person, to be able to send her 4 weeks into her new job to a training session out of town. You know, in previous places that wouldn't have happened. They would have been like, you have to be here a year before you could do anything like that. So that's been really helpful.
Thank you all for your responses. Okay, so our next question is for Stephanie and Lauren. What are your recommendations regarding communication if a review starts well, but the research team stalls a project or begins to take shortcuts due to time constraints, funding requirements, etc.?
This is a really great question, and I get this happening more than I would like. So in my experience, I'm very clear about what I do and what my role is in the project. If I'm a co-author, I am not one to, I'm not the reminder. I'm not the person to keep them all on task. That is not my job. So when, you know, the team starts to stall, I'm usually so busy that I, you know, I'm like, okay, you all are stalling, but that's not, I've done my part. But then I will send emails if like I know in December, like at Christmas break, somebody's gonna email me and tell me you need to do this over Christmas break. We're ready to start again. So I know that from experience. So then I will, you know, typically if somebody's stalled on a project, I'll send them an email like at the beginning of the month and say, hey, I'm getting ready to go on vacation. Do we need to do anything with this? But I typically will not send them reminder emails. If it stalls, it stalls. And I know that Lauren has experience with when people begin to take shortcuts. So I'm going to let her kind of answer that part.
Yeah, so I agree with Stephanie. I think I mentioned in our lightning talk that we had 89 hours over 20 projects stall from 2020 to 2023. And we definitely, the protocols have helped that, I think, like requiring protocols. As for like the shortcut piece, yeah, I've run into that several times and it's very frustrating. So like, and I talked a little bit about like a memorandum of understanding, and we're hoping Distiller could help us a little bit with that, or like a software program that the teams we're working with have to use. So like we have a little bit more control of our time and our data, right? Because a lot of times you've done your search, you've sent it off, all the deduplication's done, and then they have that search and they can do whatever they want with the data and you have no way to get it back. So we're hoping implementing some policies and using a product that's controlled by us as a team will kind of help that. I've also, I've had to withdraw my name from projects, and then all of those hours that I've spent on that are gone, but I'd rather do that than have my name on something that I'm not okay with. So we're also taking steps to like train people better on like what the methodology is and what it really means to do these. I tell students like your goal is to affect patient outcome, right? You're trying to do something. You have to think about your studies as people. So that's another thing that we're trying to do. So implementing both policies. Also, we're having some new hires come on. I want to have policies so they don't end up like I was when I started doing this. And like, what do I do? How do I withdraw? Like, what do I say? Like, and I want to kind of have something they can point to and say, this is our rules and regs for these type of projects. Like, if you can't do this, then we're going to withdraw our name and our data. That's all the time we put into that piece of it. So that's kind of the way we're trying to go at it at UK. We're still in the middle of developing those policies. I've only been in this position since March, and we're just starting to get a Distiller. So all this is going to take some time, but those, we've talked a lot about that, and that's kind of how we're doing it, and really having people know, like having the people that we're supervising now say, feel comfortable saying no, like we're not going to do that and we're going to withdraw our name from it.
Those are some great strategies. Thank you.
Jackson, can I add some stuff?
Oh,
This is Christina.
yeah, sorry.
I think it's also a little different when you're in an academic library as opposed to a medical library, because I think the incentive for the researchers is a little bit different because it's to get the publications out. They really want those journal articles out because that's what's going to get them promotion and tenure. And basically we tell them like, well, if you take shortcuts, your paper is going to be rejected. The journal's not going to accept it. You're going to have to start all over again. So either do it right the first time, or you can do it right the second time. And that usually gets them like, oh, and we can tell them about situations that we know of where things have gotten rejected because they didn't follow sort of the standard procedure for conducting a systematic review. And they're like, okay, then let's just do it right the first time. So that's sort of one way that we've dealt with it when they're like, do we really have to do, you know, risk of bias? Like, well, if you don't, you're not going to get published. Okay, I guess we'll do it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good point too. Thank you. So our third question is what approaches would you recommend to an evidence synthesis librarian or team who need to begin supporting disciplines outside of health sciences? Or how do you customize your services to meet the needs of different groups or disciplines? Megan and Rin.
Yeah, I'll start off and say, getting started with a team outside the health sciences, and I have tried so many ways to find a better way to say that, and that is the best shortcut I can find because there's so much it encompasses. And depending on what those disciplines are, I think connecting with librarians that are already doing that, like there are some robust groups already doing this, like I am in agriculture, and the U.S. Agricultural Information Network has a great, infrastructure already in place, a way to connect with librarians who are doing this work. There's an AgNIC, working group with librarians in agriculture who are doing evidence synthesis work. So looking for those communities there and the resources, and broader communities like there's an ACRL evidence synthesis methods interest group that was created to be a sort of discipline agnostic place to put resources and things. And so like their LibGuide is a really good resource. And in terms of meeting the needs of different disciplines, I think as I mentioned in our presentation, having things that are not vague enough, but that are broad enough to encompass everything. So like our form, the health sciences form used to like require or have a question where you had to put in your PICO, and PICO doesn't work for a lot of things outside the health sciences. So taking that off or making it optional or giving other options there, and also making it sort of modular so that like in our service, we are two different teams, and there are ways that, we can pause part of the service. So if the medical school is overwhelmed right now, we'll pause that part of the service, but not the rest of it. Or, leaving the language on our website sort of intentionally open. So like at the consultant level, I think, in the non-health sciences, we usually say that means up to 4 hours. And the health sciences side of things, they're like, we give an hour. So yeah, Rin, what else would you add to that?
Yeah, I guess I would add to that that as Megan said, right, even though it can create some need to create clarity in meetings, having and allowing for a lot of flexibility in what each individual librarian or what each team can do to tailor our services to fit the needs and expectations are really helpful, because even within the 6 health sciences schools and colleges that we serve, there's different levels of expertise that each of the liaisons are at, and each review project, as I'm sure you all have experienced, is a totally different scenario. So for example, we've been talking about how to maybe tailor our evidence synthesis services to require a little more upfront during busy times from medical school affiliates because of the high rate of kind of scope creep, expectation creep, and stalled reviews, and the kind of interpersonal stress that comes with that. But some of our liaisons require like the full team to meet with them for a consultation to ensure buy-in or other things like that. And the key to that in the consistency piece is to check in with each other frequently, so that even if there are differences, we're kind of aware of what each other are doing. And it also helps us create new ideas of things we might want to pilot or try if, our approaches aren't working for us.
Thank you. Katie? Yeah.
Sure. So I think for a librarian who needs to begin supporting disciplines outside of the health sciences, so this is what we do entirely, not entirely, but the majority of the support we are giving is outside of health sciences. I found the ESI extremely helpful. I'm sure there are many alums in this group, as well as people who put it on. So thank you for that. I found it really, really helpful, as did my colleague who attended with me. And then I know that there are a lot of library discipline groups sort of working on this, like as more and more systematic reviews are published outside of health sciences, librarians are having to grapple with this and realizing that some of the tools, it's kind of like sometimes it's fitting a square peg in a round hole. And so I think there are a lot of librarian communities trying to work through this. So I know I'm a business librarian, and I know that I am actually working with some colleagues outside of American University, but other business librarians on creating an evaluation tool that could be used for systematic reviews published in business and management. You know, it's still early stages yet, but I suspect that there are people doing similar things across other non-science disciplines. And then as for how to customize the services to meet the needs, so again, I'm mostly working with researchers outside of health sciences. We initially got a sense of which faculty were publishing evidence synthesis by looking at our systems called Dimensions, right? It's tracking faculty research. I'm sure there are other products with different names, but to get a sense of where those were being published, and sort of working with the faculty who had already published that way, seeing what they did, and then, you know, as to customize each individual review, we're working really closely with our liaison librarians, like for their recommendations as to which resources that we should be using if it's outside of my specific discipline.
Thank you. And then Michelle, do you have anything you'd like to add?
So we used to get, I'll use the word stuck with the non-health sciences reviews because our colleagues who deal with non-health sciences stuff just didn't know what to do with it. And we no longer can support that. So what we've started doing, they're limited to like the first, I think the second tier of our service. But what we do now is the liaison librarian needs to go to those meetings. We involve them in all communication. I've done an in-service, you know, trying to explain what these are. And we've gotten some buy-in from people who are looking to learn. And like the ACRL Health Sciences Group has been doing a series of really good webinars that we've been sharing, like you come across them, anything training opportunities. And I think just trying to start working with the people outside of the health sciences the liaisons, to get them to understand how to do these, or at least how to get started. But that's what we've been doing.
Thank you all for those insights. Our fourth question is, how do you think artificial intelligence will impact the work we do? Have any of your services started using AI technologies? If yes, in what ways? We'll start with Mei Lin and Caroline.
Great, thanks. I'll start and then pass it over to Mei Lin. So I think at this stage, you know, I still feel like a big newbie when it comes to AI. But I think where it's really going to take off is in the tools that we use to kind of make ES a lot easier, or parts of the process a lot easier. So like some tools that we recommend to students, like Covidence uses machine learning. And so I can see how that will expand. And one thing where I can see it really helping is in the early stages, especially with students who are developing their protocol and kind of thinking more about their question. Oftentimes we meet with students where either their question, they want to do a systematic review, but their question is more tailored to a scoping review, or, you know, their question isn't really like narrowed down enough. And so I think tools like ChatGPT and Gemini can really help, you know, narrow down that question, and then also help kind of determine the inclusion and exclusion criteria. Mei Lin?
Yeah, thanks. I think this is a really interesting topic as well. And what I have emphasized when I've spoken to students and researchers about it, and is that all of these tools, they're all going to impact ES, but that really, if you don't understand the underlying kind of methodology and how this research is supposed to work, they don't replace that knowledge, right? So they complement or they streamline we streamline kind of what we're already doing. And I mean, we've always kind of had tools to kind of help streamline. So I think this is just that like next generation of kind of streamlining things. And so I get frustrated when I see, you know, reviews published that say they were done kind of completely using generative AI tools, because I really think that that means you don't understand the process and are using the tools probably incorrectly. But as Jade and Carolyn mentioned, I think the places where they have a lot of potential are things, yeah, like data extraction and screening in particular. I've taught about using, say, Elicit for data extraction. So how do you pull out information from a whole slew of PDFs? It doesn't mean that the tools then synthesize the information and understand it. You still need to do it, but just to help for organizational kind of strategies. And really, I think the areas of, say, project management and search development and kind of brainstorming at the beginning are going to be kind of the main areas where Gen AI tools can help us and our patrons.
And then, thank you. And Jade, real quick, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Sure, I already spoke on what I'm doing, but what I would like to add is something very interesting. And one of the papers in my list of publications is on this, is with the ICT group, we started with a huge scoping review of virtual humans, and it's large grants from the DoD, and the DoD loved it. So they ended up bringing in a machine learning person from Europe, and they really worked on visualizing the data from the scoping review with machine learning that created a very interesting paper that you can look at, because now they were able to form clusters around this large topic of virtual humans. And now they're looking at things like one paper is just on smiles. One paper can be just on an interactions. And it was really interesting to see the machine learning applied to the data set that we created that now allows us to identify what's the best routes for systematic reviews out of this, because it ended up bringing up like 5 clusters, but they visualized it all, which I thought was great. I'm not somebody good at that. So if you're like me and not creative with visualizations, I think that that's another way that AI can really support what we're doing. But I do agree, it's not replacing what we do. It's expediting the processes with our eyes on it at all times. So at this point, maybe someday we can trust it enough to screen for us. But I love that the people I'm working with have the human component built in to the AI screening, so that we're always watching and catching anything it does wrong, because the AI has to be trained to do these things. You can't just plop it into generative AI, ChatGPT, and it's going to screen for you. It has to be built into tools that are made, in my case, for non-medical science systematic reviews.
Thank you. Our 5th question is for audience members looking to start an evidence synthesis service. What are the things they should be thinking about in the planning and launching stages of service? Katie, let's start with you.
Sure. So what I thought about, and this is what my lightning talk was on, was how to start the service without being overwhelmed. Like, so think, you know, you need to be thinking about your current workload and how this is going to fit in. If you are hired to be, you know, if you're hired to be an evidence synthesis librarian, then you're probably not looking to start the service. You're probably like being slotted in to something that already exists, but I'm sure there are exceptions to that. But I guess I'm assuming that right now. So this is like more if you are adding this on top of what you're already doing, your other librarian duties. And then I think you also want to think about what success is going to look like to you and to the library and to your administration, right? That's all important. I mentioned in my lightning talk, SMART goals, which is specific. I don't have my notes in front of me anymore, so I might get the acronym wrong, but it's specific, measurable, achievable. Some are, I forget the other ones, but coming up with like really specific goals that you can measure so that you have a sense of your success, right? And then you also need to think about like, how are people going to find out about the service? So what are you going to do to market it again so that you're not being overwhelmed? So we had what we called a soft launch, where we were basically just having people referred to us, and we weren't outwardly marketing our services. We did that for the first year. That was helpful because it kind of gave us a sense of like where within this system that we created was there the most strain, and like how could we potentially alleviate that. And then the other thing to think about is how you're going to schedule it, right? Because usually it's a team of librarians who are supporting this, at least more than one. So how are they going to schedule with a specific person? So on my campus, we're like a Microsoft campus, and we use Bookings. So we were able to integrate pretty easily, but we were able to integrate Bookings into our intake form. Who else do you need to get on board, and how are you going to do that? So we did a lot of training like for our department and library wide. And then again, I think my advice is to try to start small if you can, to see how things are going, and then you can get bigger from there.
Thank you. And then, yeah, we're still good on time, but we do have one question after this. So Maylin and Caroline, is there any?
Yeah, I was just going to say that for planning this, one thing that I wish we had done at our institution, kind of moving away from the ideas of like staffing and training, is having discussions about where evidence synthesis fits in terms of research and professional performance. So at our institution, we have very clear delineations between our professional practice, our research, our service. And the fact that evidence synthesis kind of straddles multiple areas has been a real point of contention, and I think in some points has held back the wider development of our service, because for those health librarians who publish evidence synthesis, well, is that our research or is that part of our professional practice? And for those people who aren't involved kind of on a daily basis with evidence synthesis, and then just say health librarians racking up all these publications, it can be really hard to kind of have those conversations after the fact. So I think if you're going to offer a service or thinking about offering a service and includes health, and again, outside health, I don't know how to encompass everything. I know they're a diverse group, but really clarifying how that work is going to be reflected in performance reviews, in promotion applications, in tenure applications, and getting buy-in across departments and from your administrators before you get started. Oh, and I'll turn over to Carolyn.
Actually, Maylin said it perfectly, but I don't have anything to add.
Thank you. And then real quick, Megan and Rin, is there anything you'd like to add to this question?
I will just re-emphasize that point about getting administrative buy-in and how that was so important. Like Amy and I, when we were looking to start the service outside the health sciences, really came, like it started bottom up, and we had to go to our administration and really put together a proposal that was like, this is why this is important to our liaison work. This is why this is important, and it works with our library's mission statement and goals. This is why it's important to the university and the research enterprise and all of these things, and tying it to all of those things so that then when they said yes, like then they had reason to say yes, and to free up some of our time for that sort of, and to be, like gave us the permission to go and start that service and really gave us support in a lot of ways. So I think that's really important. Ren?
I have nothing to add. It's great, Megan.
All right. Thank you all for those insights. And our last question is, how do you spread work evenly in your services and avoid librarian burnout? And yeah, I'll ask speakers please to try to keep responses quick, just so we're able then to maximize time with the open Q&A. So we'll start with Christina, Amy, and Ken.
Sure, yeah. So for us, I know that this is definitely like a work in progress. One of the things that we have found really helpful is that our supervisor is willing to kind of back us up if we say that we don't have time for a review, or we're not able to take on another review or something like that. We really do feel like we have the support from our supervisor, which is, I think, really helpful when it comes to that. And then Ken mentioned this at some point earlier, maybe this was in the beginning discussion, but just that we tell people, not now, but later. So instead of maybe just saying no, we try to say, I can't work on this review right now, but I might be able to do it later, and give some sort of a time frame. So, and then like, I always have to work on learning to say no, just in general. I have a problem with that. I think many people do, but yeah, so those are some of the main points that I know we wanted to make.
Thank you. And then Stephanie and Lauren.
So I'll just say that implementing the wait list has been very important in helping with librarian burnout. And we've implemented the wait list for our co-authors level of service. And then so for the other two, where we consult with them or we or facilitate, we definitely tell them like it's going to be, you know, a couple of weeks before I can get to this. And for the most part, everybody has been very willing to wait, and no one is really like, oh no, well, I don't want your help now. So that has definitely been key for us. And just the wait list has been critical for, you know, everyone this semester, and just kind of avoiding that burnout.
Yeah, and I would throw out too, like a lot of the times like all of us get them individually from our different areas that we are often in contact with, right? And I mentioned that we're going to be implementing Asana, and everything's going to have to go through a form. So we'll be able to see what that workload looks like, and not as much individually anymore. I think if you're going to have a service, being able, I think this kind of just happened innately for us. Like we all kind of had our little areas, and I think being able to have a place where you can like see what everyone's doing can help manage that burnout, and maybe know when that wait list is necessary, and maybe how long we can tell people it's going to be I've told people 3 months before I can even start working on this. So that's just one suggestion I have too.
Thank you. So thank you to all presenters for the guide Q&A portion. Those were some great responses, and I know a lot of questions came in for the open Q&A, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass things over to Cosette to start the Cosette and Janessa to start the open Q&A.
Thank you, Jackson, and thank you, speakers.
Well done.
Yeah.
So we have a number of questions outstanding from our earlier session. If you scroll back in the chat, you'll see I did plop the full kind of ugly spreadsheet in there. I know folks were waiting for answers for some, so thanks everyone for popping in there. For this type of Q&A open floor session, I'm also going to put the questions into the chat. That way, if our attendees have anything they want to add, you are welcome to continue those threads. We have 97 folks here who probably are all doing it slightly different from one another. And that's where the real value in our knowledge is coming in. So if it's okay with you, Cosette, I'll kick off with one of our previous questions. I'm going to put it in the chat for everyone, but I'll also say this is a question for Amy in particular. The person asked, to what extent do you assist in the development of the search for your second tier of consultation or your second tier of service? They say 6 meetings is a lot of time, and the non-expert searching may still not carry out a good search, requiring more email support beyond meetings. The too long didn't read is, how much time and effort do you spend on tier 2? And what does it entail regarding search creation?
So Amy, is it okay if I do that? Because
Yeah,
I think I do
go ahead.
more.
You do more tier 2. Yeah,
Tier
exactly.
2.
Exactly. Go right ahead.
So the tier 2 tends to be with graduate students, and they have to do the homework. Like the sessions that we meet with them are not going and showing them how to do the searches. It's checking what they've already done. And I think that, so there's one program in particular that I'm working with. So all of our PsyD students have to do a systematic review for their comprehensive exam. And they've designed it really well. And they've even said, I just got an email like, can we limit the number of meetings they have with you? Because, you know, they're actually worried about inequity, that some students are gonna ask for my help and other ones won't. So we sort of worked that out, but they do give them a year and a half before they start coming to me. They actually have already done like a narrative sort of research paper kind of review, so that at least they know the topic is viable. Then I meet with them as a group, talk about Covenants, the systematic review process in general. Then we sort of go into advanced searching for the second session, and then they start making individual appointments with me. And once they get the research question down, and I sort of give them pointers, well, you know, these are good words, and then they'll come back and it's like, can you know, I'm having trouble with this. Why am I getting, you know, 10 million results, or why am I only getting 60 results? And then we sort of play with that. But I don't meet with them again until they've done homework. So I tell them, this takes me 20 to 40 hours to do search. I'm expecting this, you know, to do the same thing. So you need to work on it for 4 or 5 hours before you come back. And I think that helps with the quality of the searching when we do tier 2. For some of the other graduate students, the programs, it'll depend on the advisor whether they will let me do the searching or not, or if they're doing the searching. But it's the same thing. If they don't spend 4 or 5, 10 hours working on it first, then I'm not going to be, the session's not going to do any good. So I don't do any homework, but they do the homework. And that's the way that we sort of talked about it, and like it makes sense. So I think that helps with the helps not waste my time when I meet with them, because I am not doing the searching with them in the meeting.
And I'm sure also verbalizing to them that 4 to 5 hour plus is kind of a wake up moment for them as well.
Right. So that's between sessions that we meet.
More time than they've ever spent on a search before. And that helps.
And I find Zoom really nice because, you know, they might share, and then I'll just say, put your search into the chat, and I'll run whatever they have come up with. And I'm like, oh, this is where, you know, you have a comma missing here, or, you know, you're oring when you're supposed to be ending, or your parentheses are wrong.
And I think that we could have a whole conference just on evidence synthesis for graduate students. That's such a big topic. So I think there might be people who want to reach out to you, Christina, to talk a little bit more about how you're handling this. So
yeah.
Well, for our next question, this was another question from earlier, and it was aimed at Stephanie and Lauren. Could you tell us more about annual reports that you're planning to publish and/or share with your community?
Yeah, so I can jump in, and Stephanie, just jump in if you have anything to add. So I would say survival was kind of how we started our program. So, you know, we didn't start using Airtable until maybe 6 to 9 months into what we were doing. And so we weren't really keeping statistics, but our administrators started to notice our workloads with these type of projects. And in order to advocate for whether it's positions or time or our new positions, we were recently promoted, and my position is to manage a lot of our systematic review services and write policies. All that I think came about because we had some of this data. So moving forward, I was able to pull some of the stuff that we had from 20 to 2023, and I think that was really helpful. So we want to continue that, and we want to make that process a little easier. And that's the reason we're implementing Asana. So some of the things that we hope to report is like the number of hours that our librarians are spending on these reviews, because just because you see one publication doesn't show the amount of hours, right? And a lot of our administrators did not know that these can take a year or 2 years to get published. So like informing them of that and showing them the hours and the time commitment that it takes was one big part. I would also personally like to track, like, if we can start reducing the number of hours we spend on projects that don't go anywhere. And like I think my current report is like 20 that we had from 20 to 2023. And I'm hoping our policies can keep doing that. So that's our goal with reporting this information, both the time and the number of projects and things like that. And hopefully get more positions is the dream, right? And I think it also helped us get our administrators to support a product. So like us looking at Covenants and Distiller SR. Stephanie, do you have some stuff to add?
I'll just add that I think that I was naive in thinking that administrators knew what it took to do a systematic review. It was clear that they did not know anything about systematic review. So it was really the policy or what their annual reports really did help kind of, with them understanding and us just telling them.
Absolutely. That communication can be so difficult though, and time consuming. And Lauren, it sounds like a job in of itself, right?
Exactly. I was going to ask a question that Eric Toole submitted via chat, and this is for anyone who might want to chime in. A lot of the sessions this week talked about implementing a 3-tiered model. I know a lot of us are using that model in our services, and we've also heard from some speakers about the downsides of this model. So for those of us who are considering using the 3-tiered model, are there drawbacks and downsides that are important to consider, especially for folks building a new service from the very beginning? Let's talk more about these tiers. Michelle?
I think one thing to think about is who is doing these. Like, we have a lot of students who are doing these as projects. And I think for us, getting rid of the middle tier or the first tier would not really work, but that's us. That's my institution. I think you really have to know who's your population, who's using stuff before you make these calls. Because I think that's gonna dictate what you're doing. I will say I've learned a lot this conference, and I think there's a lot of food for thought, and we may need to go back and tweak, but I would say definitely know your population and don't rule out something, because if it's not going to fit for everyone you have, it's going to be a problem.
That's really great insight on, doing a bit of a needs assessment before you jump in. Lauren, would you like to share?
Yeah, I'll just, so we implemented a 3-tier model for a very similar reason. Like, we had a lot of students who were coming in wanting to do research, and their advisors would say, do a systematic review. So we wanted to teach them what the process was, right? So that's where our models came from. We have this consultative model, we have this acknowledgement level, and then we have our co-authorship. And we didn't really do that co-authorship with students. I would say that's changing more because of the sheer number of them. Like, the consultative models, like, it just takes so much more time. And I would say I've been batting around the idea, especially with our wait list. I personally have noticed that now people are like, okay, you can't help me with this, but let me have a consult with you and you show me how to do it. I've gotten 2 today already who were like, well, you can't do this, so let's just meet and talk about it. So I think just if you're doing this, like, consider like the repercussions from what you implement. So I don't know, we don't have an answer to that right now, but I just wanted to share kind of what that cycle might look like.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that has most impacted the evolution of our service are the individuals finding all of the loopholes that I never thought of, such as, oh, you can't collaborate right now? That's okay. Let's schedule 10 consultations in the future. You have time for me now. And that's just what we learn, and sometimes tighten up policy on.
Exactly. Well, we got another question in chat during this session too. Burnout is prevalent across medical librarians, and I'm just going to interject here. I think as a non-medical librarian myself, I focus on evidence synthesis across disciplines. I think that's true for a lot of us. And it's apparent from the conversations here at LESS and also from Medical Library Association conferences and the like. Has anyone been successful at curbing burnout or recovering from burnout? How did you accomplish it? And has there been support from leadership regarding librarian burnout? And I'm so excited to hear your thoughts. Michelle?
I said it in the chat, but I'll say it again. I think this is where having a coordinator makes a huge difference. I'm very fortunate. My co-author and coordinator, Liz Stelrecht, is really good about checking in with everyone and making sure they're not overwhelmed and making sure these are these are sent out in an equitable fashion. And also, I think having someone to be in your corner when things go horribly wrong. I have had the misfortune of being on a review, though I'm meeting with this team tonight, you know, and I think that really helps. Now, if you don't have that, I don't know what to tell you, but like that has been a lifesaver for me, is having someone who's like making sure we're not being slammed with all of these, so.
Thank you. I mean, I think community and network is what we are also trying to build here. And if there are ways that your partners outside of your university or your hospital setting or your institution can support, that would be fantastic too. Janessa, do you want to take that last question? I think that was in.
Oh, I was terrified you were going to ask me if I had a solution to burnout.
Do you have a solution to burnout, actually?
Of course, it's let's start more projects.
Solution.
Surely that is how you cure burnout, right? Our last question that we have in the Q&A right now pertains to memorandums of understanding. So aside from the ICMJE author guidelines, what do you typically include or see included as part of an MOU for co-authorship level support? So what's in your MOUs? All right, Lauren?
Yeah, so I can start. We haven't created ours yet. It's just something that we've been thinking about. So I don't have a great answer for that right now. We're going to be working with our assistant dean of like operations to help us develop that, to make sure we're in adherence to like what the university policies may be. So I would definitely like consider reaching out to whoever your all's corresponding person was in your institution, just to make sure you're like in alignment with what they're wanting to do. And you don't want to be out of alignment with the university. If you're in an academic setting, if you're in another one, I'm sure there's a similar type of position. And I would say, like, we're still in developing it. I would look at some of those journal guidelines and things like that. I know there's other institutions that are doing that. So we might reach out to some of them and see what they're doing. And I really want to have roles and responsibilities laid out, not just like what that authorship is. Here is like, so like Stephanie was saying that she presents in every meeting what her role is. And all of us in our system have done it a little differently. I want to kind of standardize that so the researchers are upfront and know what we're going to do. Because I get a lot of people in medicine who are students who've never done research before and like don't know like how to even start risk of bias. And that's not my role. That should be your primary advisor's role in this part of the project. So I think things like that is what we want to include and really detail out. Also, like the rule, like with a distiller, like we're an active part of this project. You can't just change like the search parameters down the line because our search doesn't meet with that. So making that type of stuff clear is what we want to include in ours as we're developing it.
And I think it's important to remember that for all of our policies, procedures, MOUs, they are never perfect on the first draft or the first go live date. They tend to be very living documents. I was going to share, Cosette and I did our first project in 2022, 2023, just recognizing how valuable it is to creep on other libraries' evidence synthesis services and see what they're doing. I know some folks have shared their policies and MOUs in the chat. I put in the chat an OSF repository we made back in the day that we really, really need to update. And we had 6 different libraries, including our own, submit our policies, procedures, MOUs, education materials, and it's all in there broken down by institution and topic. So I got really good ideas by looking at other MOUs, including getting my researchers to sign off on, you're going to give your librarian 1 to 3 months to work on a search because we have a lot of other commitments as well. And I wasn't bold enough to ask for time on my own besides a few weeks, but seeing the other policies helped me with that as well. Does anyone else want to share on policy or MOU? Oh, I love what Hannah just put in chat, under promise and over deliver.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Love that. And I'll add one thing that Lauren, you were saying, the expectations of your team, but also the expectations of your partners. So we include that, and one of the biggest, most important lines there is communication, and to understand that we're not just going to do the search and you expect it a week later, right? Like, we need to have back and forth, and it's comprehensiveness is defined by the scope of your project. So we uncover a lot of questions in that process. Do we have any other questions that have come through?
I haven't seen any questions come through the Q&A. I know some folks are commenting on things in our existing Q&A session for this forum. We have one question I did want to bring live though from the chat. It is from Jenny Pierce, who says, I'm interested in those who consider education as the first tier, including workshop series. Can you share what you're teaching and what you're focusing on in those workshops? Yep, Maylin.
Yeah, I can share. We teach a 5-part series, usually at least once a year. And the sessions are kind of an introduction to systematic reviews. The second is very much like setting it up. Like, what are the things you need to think about? Communication, file structure, data, all of that. How is the team going to work? One on advanced searching, and one on translation, because I think people often forget about that. And then the 5th has kind of varied a little bit. The last couple of times we've focused on kind of efficient and effective use of different tools to help streamline the synthesis project. So those are our big ones. We've also experimented with a lot of kind of one-offs, but the way we have set up our 5-part series is that graduate students who attend all 5 get something called, it used to be called co-curricular record. Now it's called experience record, but it goes on their transcript as they have completed this 5-part series. So I think for grad students and summer research students, that makes it more appealing to attend all 5, and we can track in our kind of spreadsheets that they've actually stayed and watched the whole session. I mean, they're in the session. Are they watching? I don't know. But, and I think that it's been really popular, and we've been doing it for health and outside of health for the last couple of years. So focusing more like on fundamentals and some of the stuff, not just searching, but other parts as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And to have the uptick and have the buy-in and attendance as part of the battle too. Stephanie, would you like to share and kind of wrap up our Q&A here?
Sure. We do a research workshop series, and we focused a lot on what was just said. You know, what's the difference between a systematic review and a literature review? Basic advanced searching and translation. We've done all of those things, but one thing that we are doing this year that I just kind of wanted to throw out there, we're doing like a horrors of research. So during the month of October for Halloween. So we're doing a session on, you know, the systematic reviews that are done that are terrible. Just kind of letting our students, our researchers, the faculty know that this is not good research and how we can help them do better research. So that's just something that we're really excited about, and it's part of our research workshop series.
I love that so much. I can't wait to hear how that goes. It's almost like negative reinforcement training. Don't be these people.
Yeah.
We've got 2 whole minutes. Jade, would you like to share more on workshops?
Yeah, I don't run a tiered model, but I did want to share that I do have an instruction component, and I've paired, as many people have talked about, with our Center for Excellence in Research, and they ask me twice a year to do a workshop for faculty. So again, I'm on the non-medical science campus, and it's really interesting. I have great attendance, but I have a lot of people that email me during the session and say that they've been working on what they thought was a systematic review, but after listening to me, they realized that they weren't doing things correctly. And would I have a meeting with them? And those often end up to be projects that go full to publishing. So, and then I also offer one-shots into graduate classes. So if they just want their students to understand, I'm seeing that this graduate students being told to do a systematic review when they're really meant to do a systematic search. faculty and doing dissertations, they want to see that strategic search that we do and we report it, right? So it's in our systematic reviews. So I do have a lot of that coming. So I have a session for that for PhD students on how do you just track your systematic searching for your lit review in your dissertation. I'm not going to help them do that, but I will give them the tools and the tracking sheets. So I just wanted to add that. I'm not tiered like people are calling tiers, but I do have that education component.
And I think just to wrap up our Q&A session, which goes so quickly, I think we could have a entire conference just of Q&A and people sharing experiences, which kind of this was. But it really depends on knowing your institution and knowing what people need and adapting as we go along. And that's one of the main stories we've been telling, is how we're all adapting and changing and growing.
All right. Well, it is at the top of the hour. So Janessa and I don't really have closing remarks or anything for today. We just wanted to send another message of appreciation to everybody who has made this week what it is. Thank you to all of our presenters. Thank you to all of our submitters. We are so excited about all of the information that we've heard throughout the week. Thank you to the LESS Planning Committee. Thank you to our attendees. Thank you to those who are watching it later on. And we hope to have a lot of conversations in the near future.
Absolutely. And I just want to encourage, there have been so many great comments and ideas and calls for future community building amongst those of us who are working in evidence synthesis, no matter our discipline. If you have an idea, my last thought is just run with it.
Yes.
People will show up, people will be happy to be there and share. We gain so much from supporting each other. And so I hope to see less in the future. I hope to see more and more opportunities like this in the future as well. That being said, we are 1 whole minute over. The conference is over. We can stop recording. We're off the record. We'll hang out for a little bit, but thank you everyone.